What do you consider to be the core of your identity? What are the things that make you, you? The roles we play in life certainly play a part in that. Your personality is another big part. How people describe you. Oh, she's so sweet. She's a wallflower. She's a shrinking violet. She's unapproachable or intimidating. She's such a driven woman. What about the very name by which people call you? Your first and last name tell us something about you, right? There are dozens of aspects to who we are, and arguably, divorce can change them all. No wonder we feel so disoriented. You're not the same person today that you were when you walked that aisle, and you won't be the same person in a year or 5 years from today, whether or not you divorced. And not being entirely sure who you are in the middle of a divorce is totally normal. So today we're going to have a casual and encouraging conversation about why that's a very good thing.
Welcome to the Starting Over Stronger show, where you'll find help and hope for your divorce survival and recovery. Divorce well, live well.
Hello and welcome back to the Starting Over Stronger Divorce Survival and Recovery show. I'm excited today to bring in a guest who's an old friend of mine, and we're going to have a great conversation today about you finding your new identity as you go through divorce. Welcome to the show, Rebecca.
Thank you, Annie. It's so great to be here and see you again.
Yeah, you as well. So Rebecca Thesman is an author, speaker, and teacher, if I recall correctly, but I'm going to have you tell us a little bit about what you're doing in the world today.
Yeah, what I'm doing in the world today. I am still writing. I just released my 19th book.
Wow.
And doing writing coaching. So helping I always call myself a kind of a writing midwife. I help other writers birth their words.
Ah, there you go.
Yeah. And also doing some editing, for people who have already written a book or articles or whatever, and, need to have another eye on them. So I've been doing quite a bit of that, especially during COVID, because a lot of people were writing during COVID.
Right.
So I've been doing that and speaking. I actually have a speaking engagement tonight, so getting ready for that and looking forward to that. So,
what kinds of things do you like to speak about? Writing?
Well, yeah, writing for sure. I've done quite a few, writers' conferences where I'm one of the presenters.
Mm-hmm. I attended one of those.
Yeah, you did, and it kind of depends on the group. Like tonight is a senior group. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to be talking about how to write your faith legacy.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I'm really getting into that. I have a lot of clients who are into writing their memoir. Mm-hmm. And they're in the senior years and they want to leave behind a record. And so really getting into that with a lot of clients and speaking about that more, the importance of leaving a written record.
Yeah.
And how we can do that in ways that are safe, for the family and everything, and whether we want it to just be for the family or we want to actually put it on Amazon and send it out to the world. So that's kind of a lot of the speaking I've done. And then, usually whatever book I have released, it kind of opens up a world of whatever book that's for, like whether it's Alzheimer's or, like I said, seniors and memoir, or the one I just released for single moms. And so those kind of speaking events just kind of happen organically with the book.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what is your latest book for single moms?
Yeah, it's called Just for Today, Hope for Single Moms.
Okay.
And it's meditations and practical tips. One of the things I learned as a single mom was that I no longer had hours and hours of time to study the Bible and do all that. And so these are just very brief. You can do them in maybe 5 minutes, even less. Just some little nugget that a single mom can take with her that day, just for today. Because as we learn in single mom life, putting together like a 5-year plan doesn't happen anymore. It's a lot of times it's just one day at a time.
Yeah.
And so that's where the book came from. And it's out there in the world now. It's on Amazon. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think that it sounds like you're the perfect person to talk with about finding your new identity through divorce. And certainly single moms or about to be single moms are a big part of the audience here. So thank you for sharing that. And I think I might know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyway. What is it that made you want to appear on the Starting Over Stronger show?
Well, I am one of your listeners.
Okay.
Then also because I know you and I have followed your story and respected you and admired you through the years. So, at the very least, I wanted to just connect with you again and see how you were doing.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, we had a great conversation the other day, and I think we have arrived at a really nice topic that you will have the opportunity to tell us as much as you want of your own story from and through divorce and single mom life, and how you created a new identity in some various different ways. And I'm sure you have some wisdom to share on that. So let's just start with that. Tell us your story, whatever you want to tell us.
Well, yeah, I do hope to share some wisdom, because I think that's something that we should do, particularly as women starting over, and is to share with others and help others along the way. So I was married for 25 years to my best friend, and then I wasn't. And I was raised in a very legalistic religion where divorce was absolutely kind of the worst thing in the world. It was better to die than get divorced. And so I really, really struggled with that whole term. Even the word was harmful and hurtful to my soul. A lot of things happened during that time of rediscovering myself, but giving myself plenty of time to grieve. And then I was raising a teenage boy at the same time. So going through that, I lost my job at a church, and so had to start over with a new mindset of, okay, I'm not going to be on church staff anymore because of that divorced label. And it was actually many years later when I was talking to my counselor, and she said, well, why do you have to use the word divorced? Well, usually because, when you do things where they ask you, your marital status, it's one of the choices,
Yeah.
She said, why don't you just say single? And I thought, okay, why not? And so I started doing that. And then I kind of came up with my own title several years later, after I had recovered and, kind of rebranded and all this kind of stuff, and knew who I was now. Somebody asked me if I was married, and I said, no, I'm free. And I thought, I like that even better. Freedom.
Yeah.
So, and freedom is one of my core values. So, that whole working through that whole label, that whole mindset was really, really hard. And it took me several years of working through that. And I was in, I always think of the seasons of life. And of course, we're in this beautiful season now of fall, which is one of my favorites. But there are definite seasons that you go through as you go through divorce. And the first season was survival. I worked a lot of temp jobs. I worked 3 jobs at a time. I continued to write. Writing was one of my jobs, freelance writing, sending out articles, getting in those checks. And so survival took several years of just, learning financial survival, that whole one day at a time thing, making every single penny count and wondering, okay, how am I going to pay the bills and all of that? I mean, it was a time of gut-wrenching prayer almost every day. But I will say that, especially during that time, God was so very real and so sweet to meet the needs. And then also, and I think this is important for single moms particularly, is that I had a group of women supporting me in various ways. I mean, there was one of them that was supporting me financially, but there was one of them that was just an encourager. And I needed that a lot. And then there was one that she called it her ministry of garage sailing. So she would go to garage sales and find things that different people would like or need. and they would end up on my front porch, and she would bring them by, and and there were women who brought me groceries, and there were women who helped me pray through the house when I moved, and there was a woman that was just fun, and she would make me go out and do fun things, because we can get stuck in that survival place where we don't ever have any fun.
Yeah.
So having that group of women around me was so important. Just gave me hope. That things were going to change someday, and that I was going to make it through this. So that season of survival, it was so important to have that support. And then my next season, and I was trying to think, how many years it took, but, survival was at least a good 2 to 5 years of, counseling and all that kind of thing. But then I moved into the next season, which was kind of a season of reflection and making decisions. They tell us not to make, when you're going through a grief process, don't make life-changing decisions right away. You need to process, and you need to think. So my reflection season was more of my son was going to graduate from high school, was more of, okay, who am I now? What kind of decisions need to be made? And I had been renting a beautiful townhome. And so it was like, do I want to make the decision now of buying a house? Am I ready for that now? Do I want to stay in this same town? If my son doesn't have to go to school here, he was going to go to community college, and part of that decision just happened organically because I got a job here in the Kansas City metro area. And so commuting from Lawrence became really financially hard and physically hard. I had to get up at 5 every morning and all that kind of stuff. So that decision was kind of made for me. And sometimes that does happen in this whole starting over stronger life, is that decisions are kind of made for us. And some of them are good and some of them are not so good, but it just is part of the change. Yeah. And then the third season is, where I gradually rebranded, got a new identity as far as what I was doing. And I so love what I'm doing now, coaching full time. So it's been I worked in several nonprofits as a communications person, always writing, and as doing some administration type stuff. All of those nonprofits were organizations that help people. And that was kind of my mantra. I felt like I was still in a type of ministry, even though it wasn't church, helping people. And so that was a good thing. But, I call this my final act, because I won't tell you how old I am, but
hey, the final act can be a long time.
It could be a long time. That's right. But this final identity is, at least I think it's the final one. Maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say you might discover another one later.
Maybe God has something else. Coming. Around the bend. I don't know, but
how they do that at concerts where they make you think they're leaving, and they even do leave for a little while.
There you go.
And then they come back.
The encore.
That's the best part of the show.
Yes, exactly. We'll see what happens. Yeah. So I really love what I'm doing now. I love more of who I am. I love my freedom. Although empty nest is kind of difficult right now, but it's another change and another type of grieving and another part of a new identity. So we'll see what happens, that, but really do enjoy who I am now. Some of those old tapes once in a while will rewind, you're a divorced woman, couldn't you have done something better?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I do know that I worked really, really hard with counselors and pastors. I read books. I did everything that I could do to try to save the marriage.
Yeah.
And then one day I woke up and I thought, why am I doing all the work? And so, telling those tapes to shut up and leave me alone is a good thing to do. And, and I try to keep my mind free of those things and keep my mind more focused on positive things, positive affirmations, hope. I write on my blog about hope all the time. And, and I try to fill my mind with positive Bible verses, and that kind of thing, and reading good books and all that sort of thing. So, taking care of the mind is really an important part of who we are.
It's the most important part, honestly.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Well, I think there's so much to what you've shared. I mean, there's so many different aspects of us as people. And so, of course, there's that many aspects or more of re-identifying who we are now. Maybe who we are now is who we've always been, but maybe it's somebody we used to be a long time ago that seems like an old friend that we kind of remember, but we don't really we don't feel like we know them very well now, And so there's a lot to the time that you talked about being like your survival time of 2 to 5 years. There's a lot happening in our minds emotionally, our vocation, physically, even, mentally, financially, and so many things. Whether we're conscious of it or not, those processes are rebranding, and we're having to make different decisions, and we're being asked to think differently about things, whether or not we choose to, right?
Right. Exactly.
So, and I think it's interesting that you brought up the whole thing with the, when you have to fill out a form and they ask you single, married, divorced, I always found that really interesting because what difference does it make to them if I'm single or divorced?
Exactly.
I don't have a marriage partner, and that the only reason that would come into play would be, like insurance for like a medical thing or something. So it's like, I think the fact that divorced is on the form is just somebody being nosy.
Yeah.
And I always refused to put divorced. I'd always checked single. So,
yeah. I think so too. It's kind of like, is there some kind of a stalker out there that wants to know? I don't know.
Yeah. What difference does it make? Right.
Yeah. And and I know that there are some organizations that they have to keep certain data, that they turn in for their money or their regulation or whatever it is. But but still, it's kind of like, I mean, and even on a lot of the forms now, you don't have to put your race. So why should I have to put my marital status?
Yeah, right. If I'm the sole insurance carrier, nothing else really should matter to them. Yeah. And I think it goes along with what we're talking about, because the words that we use in everyday life and certainly in how we describe ourselves are very powerful when it comes to our identity. If you say you're a mom or if you say you're a widow, those things communicate something, right? So of course, single and divorce does. And I think for a lot of people, single, it has a negative connotation in their minds. And I think I've kind of talked about this a little bit on an episode with Dr. Ann Morgan. We were talking about the shame of divorce and how it just seems like our whole world just, operates on this, everybody should be paired up with somebody kind of concept, which is completely unrealistic. And so I thought it was great when you said that, you just saw single as free. And I encourage people to think of it that way, because the truth is that in a way, it's very, very much about freedom, because, you get to decorate your house how you want. You get to eat what you want for dinner. You get to spend your days however you want. You don't have to answer to anyone else. And that can, for some people, be very crippling. And then for other people, it's extremely freeing. And it's all about how you choose to look at it. It's a mindset thing.
It really is a mindset thing. And, for years when I was working with single moms, the whole idea of, we worked a lot on finances, and actually statistically women are a lot better with money than men are. And having that freedom to, decide, okay, this is how I'm going to structure my budget. This is how much goes for giving away. This is how much goes for my bills, my spending. And this is how much goes for fun, and I'm not going to have to ask anyone's permission to do that. I have known women who are married who have to ask their husband's permission to go to the store and buy some clothes. And there are even some women that I have known who the husband would go with them to the store and would have to say yes or no, to the outfit. It's like, please.
It's such a foreign concept as a single woman of several years, right? It's like, wow.
It really is. So it is a total mindset of being free, of doing, what I want to do, as long as it, there's really 3 guidelines in life that Jesus gave us, is love God, love other people, and love yourself. As he said, love others as you love yourself. So going with those 3 guidelines, those are the important things. So as long as I'm not hurting someone else, if I'm helping someone else, I have the freedom to do that, to do whatever I want to do. And and
furthermore, sometimes, honestly, when you think of boundaries, sometimes doing what is right and good and healthy for you actually does, at least in appearance, hurt others, because somebody that was benefiting from you not having boundaries doesn't like the fact that you have boundaries. So you have to even really be cautious about that one, because their life and how they interpret my actions and words and the way I live my life is 2 different things. They can do what they want with their own life and what their interpretations are of mine, but I'm only responsible for me, and I'm, you get what I'm saying. It's not,
absolutely.
It's not as clear cut as we can't ever upset anyone else, because
true.
Yeah.
Sometimes loving someone is the best way to love them is to not enable them, to set those boundaries so that they know what the guidelines are and you know what the guidelines are. And in the long run, the relationship, whatever that is, can be better down the road if that person is accepting of those boundaries. But we are never told to accept toxic behaviors, toxic relationships. Abuse is not something that God wants for his daughters. And so we need to know enough about ourselves to know what our guidelines are, what our boundaries are, and what that's going to look like. Absolutely right.
Starting Over Stronger is now offering a Divorce 123 online class for anyone who needs to understand the cycles of dysfunctional relationships and whether you've tried everything so you can move forward without regret, to decide if divorce is the answer or if there's still hope for meaningful change, and to get past the fear of the future, to take the necessary steps for your health and the health of those you love, such as your kids. Get all your questions answered in just 2 hours on the first Saturday of December. Isn't it about time you put your needs first? Visit startingoverstronger.com and scroll down the homepage for the Divorce 123 event to get your questions answered and register today.
Well, so what would you say if you could pare it down to just like the 3 main ways that you rebranded yourself after divorce? What would that be?
Well, I would say for me, of course, as a writer, my journal, was my first therapist. And I mean, I have a whole box full of my journals through the years, and there's about 5 or 6 of them that are just during that survival time. And so, just vomiting on the page, just, writing out, get the anger out, get the disappointment, the betrayal, the pain, get it out on the page. Because a lot of times, actually, when you go back, when I finish a journal, I go back and I reread it and I kind of highlight things that jump out at me. And sometimes I'll write an article about that or a devotion or something. But it's also kind of, I've learned something, I've learned this thing that I went through that I wrote down. And so for me, journaling is a huge, big thing. And then another one is, like I mentioned, the support of women. Women are, whether it's, some people have family close that are supportive. I didn't have that. My family is 250 miles away. And of course, we could talk on the phone, but it's not the same as, you need you need hugs. You need that one-on-one. You need people who are there who will bring you a meal. Sometimes you're just at the end of your rope and you can't even think what am I going to make for my child and me tonight? And so being able to have that freedom to call somebody and say, can you please just go to Wendy's and bring me something, or whatever.
Yeah.
But that support, like I mentioned, that I had is just so important. And then, like you mentioned, the third thing is the mindset. And and I think, of course, number one for me is to remind myself, and I've told women this every day or often, to go to the mirror every day, look yourself in the eye, because when you really look yourself in the eye, you can see yourself as a little girl, and you can see yourself as a teenager, and you can see yourself as an adult. And when you're looking at your eyes, you don't notice the wrinkles and all those other things. So you just look in the eyes and say, you are important and you are beautiful and God loves you. Because when you go through divorce and you realize this person that you loved no longer loves you, that's a real terrible thing.
Yeah. But
to remind yourself, you count, you're important, and you're important to God, and God loves you. And getting that in your mindset, I could even see myself standing up taller, looking myself in the mirror. And then sometimes I have a little tiara, not a real one with jewels. Sometimes I put on my little tiara, you can't feel bad about yourself when you got a tiara on. So that whole mental mindset. So that also means that you surround yourself with people who are going to build up that positive mindset. And you surround yourself with books and movies and good things, that train your mind to have hope. During my survival period, there was a movie that came out called Under the Tuscan Sun. And I like Diane Lane anyway as an actress. And it was based in Italy. So, I mean, really.
Who couldn't?
So, yeah, I took my group of Bible study ladies to that movie, and we all liked it and everything. But it ministered to me so much. It gave me so much hope that I went back and I saw it myself several times. And then whenever I could, I would find it on TV and watch it again. And then a couple of years ago, I actually bought the DVD, and I still watch it, because there are scenes in there where she's on the floor in the fetal position. I remember that. Yeah. But it's a movie about hope, and about how she rebrands herself. She goes to Italy. She buys a house in Italy. She redoes this villa. She has a whole new life, and she cooks for other people, and and it's just a beautiful story. So I had to fill my mind with positive things that would give me hope, so that when the survival season was over, I could move into the next season with a little bit of joy and with hope, and knowing that I'm going to be okay. I mean, life may be still hard, but I've already gone through the hardest stuff.
Yeah. Life was hard before too, right?
Life was really, really hard. Yeah. So I've already gone through that. And
so you said your three things were journaling, your tribe, and your mindset.
And the mindset.
Okay. Very good.
Those are my three.
Well, as we have kind of heard your story, I think all different things have probably risen to the surface for different listeners. But I think it's interesting that I have a list here of things that I kind of wanted to talk about, just because of my experience personally and professionally with other people, of the main things that tend to surface when we think about choosing who we want to be as we go through this, and who we want to be in the future, and who is the real me, and what does that even look like. And so it's interesting that a lot of the things that you talked about are on this list. So we'll just kind of go over it again anyway. So the first thing that I put was just to allow time, because as you said, survival mode, your brain needs time to recalibrate. If you jump right into a new relationship, or right into anything without just, I'd say a good year and a half at least of just being, you're going to create more stress, even though you're probably doing whatever the thing is you're doing to try to alleviate stress. So,
exactly.
Time, live life day by day, and learn to accept life on that term of one day at a time. because so much of the stress that we have and the anxiety and depression that we deal with, I've heard it many times. Depression is when you're looking at the future or at the past, and anxiety is when you're looking at the future. If you focus on today, you won't be anxious or depressed.
That's right.
You just do the things that's in front of you to do today. It's only when you go back or forward that you
exactly
get anxiety and depression.
And that is so true. And, and every morning when I wake up, I remind myself, God's mercies are new today for today. God's mercies are new today. And I still, even though my personality is, I'm a planner. I think COVID has taught us, we can't plan ahead that far. So I still remind myself just today, for today, God's mercies are new for today. What are going to be some good things just for today?
I often say it like this. The Bible says that God's mercies are new every morning. And I say, and he did that because he knew we'd need them that often.
Great. I love that.
So one of the big changes that a lot of people make as they go through divorce is their name. And like we talked about earlier, there's a lot of emotion and power and mentality in the words that we use. And that goes especially for the very name that we call ourselves by. So talk a little bit about, I don't know if you mentioned that or not, did that decision look like for you during your story?
Well, I actually changed my name several years ago, and this was before the divorce, because I grew up as Becky. That's the nickname. But when I was in my early 30s, I was doing some counseling and doing some reading and stuff, and some of the memories from my childhood started to resurface. Several situations of sexual assault. And so whenever I thought of that name, Becky, it reminded me of that little girl and how powerless she was and how afraid she was. And so when my husband and I moved to a new town, it felt like a new start for me. And so I said, I'm not going to be Becky anymore. I'm Rebecca. And so I have kept that whole name, that Rebecca mentality. That the past is the past, and I'm not going to live in the past anymore. But then when I started to write and publish books, I went with RJ, my initials, Rebecca Jean. A reason for that, because particularly when I started writing and when I was writing in the Christian field, women writers were not given as much credibility.
I've heard about that. Yeah,
the men had the credibility. And so I thought, if I use my initials, nobody will know who I am. And I'll get the message out there, which was more important to me than them knowing, who I am. So that worked pretty well. And I got a column in a magazine, and I wrote for lots of church magazines that were very patriarchal, men and men. And then a funny thing happened. We went to a reunion, my husband's reunion at his college. And one of his buddies came up to him and said, "Oh, I see you've been writing for this magazine. I really like your articles." And my husband said, "No, that's my wife." And the guy looked at me and he turned around and walked away. And I thought, well, there you go. So, I did not change my last name. And I did that just kind of for my son, just so, it wouldn't be any confusing thing for him. But I have changed name, from Becky to Rebecca to RJ. And so that kind of goes in with that whole idea. Yeah.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah. And a story that I don't tell real often is that I made a very similar decision several years ago. And it was also actually sort of as a part of my divorce, although I did it just a little bit sooner than I did the divorce. But I had just kind of, I had some trauma resurface from my childhood as well. And there was a strong association with my given name. And I didn't have a way of, kind of shortening or lengthening that name that I couldn't get away from that. So I actually legally changed my first and middle name when I went through my divorce, or just prior to it. And it was a huge change. It was something I had thought about for many years. And it came to me basically as just talking with a therapist about the situation and the trauma attached to it and all that. And her saying, well, why don't you change your name? And I was like, I'm 40 years old. You can't change your name when you're 40. And so I just kind of dismissed it. But I guess it just kind of lied dormant in my mind for a couple of years. And then all of a sudden I realized, literally everything in my life is about to change. And I'm going to be starting, a new life, a new career. I'm going to certainly lose friends and family. And I'm going to make new friends and new family. And so if I'm ever going to do it, now's the time. And so I did it. And it was not near as hard of a transition as I thought it was going to be, but I chose my name. I studied names for a long time and ended up with Annie because it spoke of, just being a woman of hope and prayer and just choosing more or less those positive things over the negative. And that was what my new life was going to be all about. So it was the perfect fit for me. And so basically what I did was my former middle name was Joanne. So I just sort of swapped them around and did Annie Joe. So
there you go.
I kind of sort of kept part of my given name, but got rid of the first name, which I really don't talk about much at all, but it is who I was until I was 44. So, and it never really fit me. And so it's been very interesting since I have changed. I will occasionally share that story in small groups or with different people. And the feedback that I get 100% of the time is, you don't look anything like that name. You look like an Annie.
Yeah, there
or
you
I would
go.
even have people say, the first time I ever heard it, I was in a divorce care group at church, and the lady was doing attendance, and she was like, don't tell me your name. I'm going to try to remember it. I remember that thinking that you look like your name, but let me say, and so I thought it was interesting that I got that kind of feedback about it, all the time when it was relatively new for me. People were like, yeah, you look just like an Annie.
There you go. Yeah, it fits you well. And I was thinking this morning, because I knew you when you were going through that change. I thought, I can't even remember what her name was before. I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, it sure is. And another big change that happens for, I would say, most women as they go through divorce is a career change.
Are you struggling to decide whether divorce is the right decision for you, or just tired of feeling like you're broken and everything is all your fault? The decision of how and whether to leave a toxic relationship can take years without good support from people who understand. The Starting Over Stronger Toxic Relationship Recovery Support Group is designed with you in mind. Led by me, certified divorce and life transition coach Annie Allen, and with a small group of women in your shoes, you're going to find understanding here. We're going to talk about the patterns of these relationships and what you can do about them. There are currently 2 weekly groups running, one on Monday evenings at 6 p.m. Central and the other on your Wednesday lunch hour at noon Central. So whether you need an evening or a daytime group to meet your needs for privacy during this call, please consider joining us. If you're interested in learning more, just send an email with your interest from your secure email address that only you have access to Annie@startingoverstronger.com. And if you're in a controlling or abusive relationship, wondering how you could ever be a part of a support group like this without putting yourself at risk or exposing your desire to leave, please indicate that in your email and we can discuss solutions. You can make this work. And I know you feel alone, but you're not. Reach out and find the help you need.
Sometimes that's from stay-at-home mom to actually going to a paying job. And sometimes that's just the part-time thing that we've been doing isn't enough to pay the bills. We have to go get a corporate job, or we go back to school and learn a trade or what have you. So what did that look like for you again?
Yeah, it was interesting because I had just been accepted to get my master's degree at KU when the world just fell apart for me. And I knew I was going to have to, at that time, I was I was at home doing full-time freelance writing and just, supporting my husband in his work. My checks went so that he could get his master's degree and all those things. And of course, and then I was raising my son. So I really wasn't out into the work world, except that I was doing the church ministry. And so when that all changed and that all, was gone, it was like, oh my goodness, I had been in this field of ministry for so long. And I knew that I couldn't work several jobs, raise a son, go through divorce, and get a master's degree. So I let the master's go. And, if I could go back, which we can't, I would have, before I even got married, I would have gone ahead and got a master's, but I didn't. And I haven't really needed it through the years. So the change happened in the job changes. But doing temp jobs, it was interesting because there was always an opportunity in a place where I was to help someone. And then working in nonprofit and writing. A lot of my writing, is geared to hope, to help people find hope and to help them through whatever they're going through, whether it's caregiving or divorce or whatever. Yeah. And so it was actually my CPA who gave me the aha moment. We were going through my taxes one time and I said, well, this sure looks a lot different than ministry, except that some of the income is the same as ministry because it still wasn't, real high or anything. And he said, you're still a minister because you're helping people. And I thought, oh my goodness, aha. Oh,
that felt good. I'm sure.
And I thought, well, that's right. Yeah. So, even when we have to change jobs, the core of who we are is still there. And that's why I think, going through your core values is such an important activity, an important assessment thing to do, is that, finding out who you are at the core, what is the most important part of you goes on no matter what your job title looks like. Yeah. But it's, it's kind of, I'm really grateful because when I was in high school, women pretty much had two choices. You could either be a nurse or you could be a teacher. So I knew I didn't want to be a nurse. I didn't like blood. So I went into education, And then, of course, the highest standard in those days in the community where I was raised was to be a wife. That was wife and homemaker. That was the tops, And so when I was no longer a wife, well, that changed as well. Yeah. So, we have a plethora of choices nowadays. And, I'm so grateful that I got certified as a life coach because life coaching, as you know, you can take it in all kinds of different directions. Like, you're the divorce coach and all that. I'm a writing coach. There's life coaches, there's executive coaches, business coaches, all kinds of coaches. And so it's a great direction to go. Yeah. We just have so many choices. So why not, once you know really who you are, why not choose something that gives you passion and joy? Yeah, as you work.
And I think that's really the main takeaway that I would want for people to reflect on when they think about career changes, because, we assign, a sort of a part of who we are to the roles that we play. And, that's probably always going to be the case. But, ultimately you get to decide what you want to do, and doing something that actually feeds your soul and gives you joy. Maybe it may be harder than getting a job, but then again, is it, because if you're working a job that you hate, what's your quality of life? So what difference does it make if you make more money, if you don't have time to spend it, or you're so stressed out, you don't really enjoy it? So
exactly. And we know that stress can kill. It can kill, not only it kills your soul, but it can actually physically kill you. So
So there's a lot of, I think that a good takeaway for this is there's a lot of just letting go and accepting where you are and discovering, letting life teach you something about yourself and what you want to do and who you want to be. And another part of that, of course, is that a lot of people are going through divorce around the exact same time that they're facing the empty nest. And the empty nest is hard, whether you are married in a happy marriage, married in a miserable marriage, or you're divorced.
Yeah.
And so, it stands alone to me as one of the most painful things that I've ever experienced. And I know a lot of people that are in it, and it's traumatizing. So it's something that I think I probably need to do a whole episode on, because there's just so much there, and we just don't have time today to dissect it. But just know that it is one of the main ways that you're going to, or one of the main arenas in which you are going to be re-identifying, because, that mom role is not done, but it's very, very different. And so there's a necessary change that has to happen there within our minds.
Yeah. And it's a bittersweet thing, because, you're glad for your kids. My son is married now. He has a lovely wife. I love her. I'm so happy for these two, and I can see the happiness in their faces, and I'm so happy for them. But at the same time, I'm sad for me. And so kind of merging those two into, okay, what can I learn from this? What can I do to make it better? How can I make it through this particular type of grief? It is a type of a grief.
Oh, sure it is.
How can I make it through this particular type of grief and come out on the other side as a positive person? You don't want to come out bitter and ugly. Come out on the other side as a positive person. So, and then how can I in the future help somebody else who might be going through it? So, it's another season.
Yep. And there's several other things on the list that I have here, and we won't have time to really spend a lot of time on any one of them, but I want to just mention them because, I mentioned earlier that physical aspects of our life change as well. Oftentimes we either lose weight or gain weight as we go through a divorce. Sometimes we needed to do whichever it was we did, and sometimes it's not a healthy change. And so as we are able to close that chapter, eventually, and I don't think it's immediate. I think it's one of those things that you got to go through your survival mode first sometimes before you're able to tap into that and really choose a healthier weight for yourself through diet or exercise, or just choosing to eat differently, not look at it like a diet. And then, of course, we've already several times touched on the mindset issues, and just, I think a big part of that is going through therapy and coaching. Certainly journaling is a big part of that. I love how you said your journal was your first therapist. I had never heard that before. That's really good.
I just made that up.
Well, that's good. You should use it, and I'm going to too.
It just came out. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So, and then another big part is rediscovering who we are spiritually. And that can look 100 different ways to 100 different people. But like you've mentioned, church changed forever because of the environments that we were in at the time of the divorce, and just the choices that we made I don't know about you, but I know for 100% sure and certain that God told me to do it, and I had his blessing on it, and I didn't do it until I did.
There are a lot of instances in the Bible where God says, he actually divorced Israel for a time, and so, his grace is always there. He understands when relationships are sour, or when there's abuse or something like that going on. He certainly understands that, and he takes care of us no matter what. He has a special love for, it's called the widow and the orphan, but there's different ways of thinking of a widow. It's not always from death. But he has a special love for single moms, and for women who go through divorce and go through that pain. So the spiritual change can really be very important.
Yeah. I see it in a lot of different ways for people, but the way I look at it, and I don't ever miss an opportunity to say that God does not prioritize marriage over your health and sanity. And so please don't do that yourself, because he does not expect that of you. So,
and marriage is an earthly thing. There will be no marriage in heaven. I mean, he says that specifically. So it's just an earthly system that we put together. So, that's right.
And a lot of that comes down to acceptance, which is the next thing on my list. There's a lot of talk about forgiveness as you go through divorce. And I recently had a conversation with someone who helped me kind of reframe that, because I've always had this sort of mentality about forgiveness that forgiveness was one thing and restoration was another. That's a big hang up for a lot of people. They feel like if they're forgiving, they're restoring a relationship, and that's not the case. You can forgive and let go of something completely and still have absolutely nothing to do with that person ever again, because, that's just the nature of the situation.
Right.
But acceptance actually shed a little bit of different light on this for me, because forgiveness almost holds a little bit of a connotation of judgment in it, because basically you're saying, I'm better than you and you did this bad thing and I'm going to forgive you for this bad thing. Uh-huh. Whereas acceptance more or less looks at it like we're both on this same level playing field, and I accept who you are, not that I will have you in my life necessarily, but I accept that you are where you are and you are who you are because of the circumstances of your own life and your own mentality. And I let that go, and I let you be who you are, and I'm going to go be who I am. And I accept that this is my past and here is my present, and I'm going to look toward my future. And I don't know, that just looked so different and felt so different to me when I really thought about it that way.
Yeah, I love that idea of the whole acceptance thing. And I had a struggle with the whole forgiveness thing, because there was just so much hurt, and it was kind of like I could forgive maybe what he did to me, but I could not forgive what he did to our son.
Mm-hmm.
That was just so hurtful. But I finally came to a point of remembering and realizing that broken people hurt other people, and so I just started to kind of pray for him. But then I just kind of came to a point where I says, okay, God, you're the one who has to do the forgiving. You're the judge.
Exactly.
You're the righteous one. Jesus actually already did that at the cross.
Yeah.
So you're the one who has to forgive. I need to move on. And he's already moved on, and so, I love that, accepting, that whole accepting thing, because if we get stuck in that forgiveness cycle, then we're constantly living in the past. And we can't just, if we constantly live in the past, we can't move on and we can't be healthy.
Yeah.
And so accepting that, okay, this is part of my journey. It happened.
Yeah.
And we were married, and there were some things about it that were really good. Certainly our son was a good thing out of that marriage. And so I accept that. But now this is where I am, and this is what I accept. Yeah. And I accept who I am in Christ. And I accept that God has forgiven me for my sins. God will do all the forgiving for his sins. And you're right. I'm not the judge.
Yeah.
God is. And God is also the great forgiver.
Yep. Well, so the last few things I'll mention are changing our self-talk. I think we've talked a lot about that. Focusing on the good. One really easy way, if you're having a hard time getting into journaling, is to just get a small little spiral notebook and have it by your bed and just write 3 things that you're thankful for that day. You can literally just bullet point them. You don't have to expand on it. Just and at first it probably is going to be the same things over and over again. But as you commit to doing that, it expands over time, and it really makes a difference. And we could again do a whole subject or a whole episode on that. But just do it. Trust us.
It really does. And I mean, there have even been medical studies done on having gratitude and how it is good for the heart and the mind and all of that. And I mean, I'm almost every single night when I take my shower, I say, God, I thank you for hot water, because I know there are people in this world who have never had a hot shower.
Yeah,
and I'm just so grateful because it makes my bones warm up, and it just So just even the little things in life, being grateful for those and being mindful of those every day. Gratitude journaling is a great way to start.
Yeah, exactly. And then some of the other big things that I'll just bullet point here is to experiment. try new clothing styles, new social circles, new flavors, new restaurants, new routines. You can literally do anything you want now. And so let that be a very freeing thing. And then declutter, give away and sell everything that you didn't use this week or this month or this year. And it will feel incredible, I promise you.
And then give away anything that has a bad memory attached.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then financial fitness. So, some of the major changes you've already talked about, and some of, for me, were really, again, a mindset thing. Mm-hmm. I had to learn to see myself as the provider, and that I always have enough. And so those are two things that my affirmations that were around my financial life and financial mentality was, I am, seeing myself now as the provider, and I always have enough. So.
Yeah. And I love that verse. I can't put my mind on where it is now, but where God gives us everything we need for life and godliness, to live financially, but also to live with hope and to live with joy. God gives us everything we need, one day at a time.
Yeah.
One day at a time.
Well, thank you again for being here and for sharing your story and your wisdom and the things you've learned. Any closing thoughts?
Well, I guess one thing would be, that wherever these women are right now, this is not the end. This is just a season that you're in, and seasons always end. And then they begin with another season. And so just to stay in hope that, it's not going to feel this horrible forever. It's, it's not going to be this dire forever. Yeah. Do your due diligence, do some of these things that we've mentioned today. And just remind yourself that life will get better. You'll make it through this journey, and it will be okay, and you'll be okay.
Mm-hmm. Everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
That's right.
Well, thank you again. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you too. You take care, Annie.
Yeah. And listeners, new adventures and the new you are on the way. So thank you for being here today to explore this with us. And we just want to encourage you to do that. Explore, embrace, and enjoy the changes that are happening in your lives. Explore what you want your new life to look like. I recommend lots of journaling for this. I always do. And then explore and experiment, and then enjoy. And no matter what comes, just choose to find the joy in it, and find where you can find joy in it. It's like the old saying goes, you can enjoy the snow or you can bemoan the snow. It's going to snow either way. So, you might as well just get used to it and deal with the changes as they come, and choose, acceptance and joy as you go. So thank you again, listeners, for joining us today for this inspiring conversation. If you haven't yet, I invite you now to join the Starting Over Stronger After Divorce private Facebook group and share your thoughts there about today's show. Tell us how you are creating the new you through divorce. And if you're ready for more support, jump on over to startingoverstronger.com, join an evening or lunchtime support group, and check out the frequently asked questions if you're curious about what divorce coaching looks like. Thank you again for being here. We'll see you again next week for more help as you divorce and hope as you are starting over stronger.